Morning, friends. It is time to read the Bible. In a second, we're going to read Mark's Gospel. We're not going to finish it by the end of the year. We'll probably get into the middle of chapter 7, but it's been fun going through it with you, painstakingly looking at each little section. Hopefully you're realizing it's far more interesting than you might have imagined. But first, it's time to share some sad news with you all. Just got a message. Sad news, but also good news. Let's start with the good news. I got a new job. I don't know if you all know this, but I work as a pastor in my spare time. When I'm not at school, I work as a pastor at a church called New City Baptist Church, and I got another job at another church. I'm still going to run my church. New City's still going to exist. It's going to run alongside the other church, but I'm going to go do that, which is really exciting. What that means is I won't be at school next year. So this is my last, 3 weeks? Is it 3 weeks now? It's my last 3 weeks of school, which is really sad. I'm going to miss you all. You've all been so lovely and kind to me, subscribing to my channel. But just everyone who drops past my window and says nice things, and I've enjoyed hanging out with you all. But alas, my time is up. But I've still got 3 more weeks, so I'll talk to you and I'll see you around. But there's my announcement. Okay, Mark's Gospel, chapter 6, verse 30. The apostles gathered around Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. He said to them, "Come to a deserted place all by yourselves and rest for a while." For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And they went away in the boat to a deserted place by themselves. Now many saw them going, and they recognized them, and they hurried there on foot from all over the towns, and they arrived ahead of them. As he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them, for they were like sheep without a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things. When it grew late, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is now very late. Send them away so that they may go into the surrounding country and villages and buy something for themselves to eat." But he answered them, "You give them something to eat." They said to him, Are we to go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat?" And he said to them, "How many loaves have you got? Go and see." When they had found out, they had 5 and 2 fish. Then he ordered them to get all the people to sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat in groups of hundreds and 50s. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and he blessed them and he broke the loaves. He gave them to his disciples and set before the people, and divided the 2 fish among them all. And they all ate and were filled. And they took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces of bread and fish. Those who had eaten the loaves numbered around 5,000 men. A miraculous story of Jesus being able to multiply food to feed people who were really, really hungry. There's a couple of details I want to draw to your attention. The first one is just that line, "You go and feed them." People have taken that line so seriously throughout the history of Christianity. That line, "You go and feed them." Your job as my disciples, as my followers, is to feed people who are hungry. And you can see so many different examples of that. You can see an example of that in town with Soul Cafe, feeding the hungry because they've listened to Jesus' voice who said, "You go and feed them." But the other details that I think are important to point out just for a minute is that last line. Now, if you're a feminist type person, you might have found that really hard, because Jesus only counts the men. There was 5,000 men, which by implication means that he actually fed a lot more than 5,000 people, because there was women and children there as well. But he only counts the men, which is troubling a little bit. But also the kind of description of Jesus, telling the disciples to break the crowds up into hundreds and 50s. It's like, why do we even need to know that detail? If it's just a story about, Jesus miraculously creating bread, why do we need to know that he broke them up into 50s and hundreds? Now, those two details point to one thing. They point to an army. And why do they point to an army? Well, only men were allowed in the army at this point. It wasn't a modern society where we could be part of the army. Only men were allowed to be in an army. at least in the armies they knew from Rome and from Israel's history. So when he says there was 5,000 men, he's saying this is an army. This is an army of 5,000 people strong. And when he breaks them up in hundreds and fifties, this is exactly how armies would break up. Their legions of warriors. They'll break them up into hundreds and fifties and then put them in around and kind of feed them. Can you see what Jesus is doing? I think this is quite beautiful. He's amassing himself an army, but not an army to fight battles. Not an army, that at its very core is violence, but what? An army whose job is to go out and feed people who are hungry. This is the kind of army that Jesus is pulling together. An army that's job is to look after the poor and the needy and the broken and the hurting, and to feed people who are hungry. Yes, feed them with food, but also in this story, he sees that they're lost and helpless like sheep without a shepherd, and he feeds them with the message of the gospel, with the message of God's loving care, that God is like a shepherd who cares for his sheep. So, go and be that army, my friends. Amen. Amen.